Shit, I stopped doing it. It wasn't helping at all. It
Worse.
just pissed me off. No,
Make a
it
couple
didn't do
of things up.
anything.
Hey, Rick, you ready?
Figure that out yet.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 12th, 2019 meeting of the City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we do roll call, I want to just commend the commissioners that are here this evening. Very little better examples of civic sacrifice occur to me than being here on Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. So thank you very much to those commissioners and staff that are here.
And our audience.
The citizens should be commended as well. Roll call.
Sherry Bilderback, here. Michael Daming.
Here.
Mark Favaza.
Here.
Rebecca Jacobs.
Here.
Jeff Moore. Paul Moran. Hart Nelson. John Nurenberger. John Ritter. Lisa Schuring.
Here.
Tom Shipley.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Bilderback. We have the May 8th, 2019 meeting minutes before us for approval. Are there any objections to that approval? Seeing none, they'll be approved by acclamation. We have several items under old business and new business this evening. At the same time, we also have a subcommittee meeting that is scheduled at the end of the month. So to the extent that there is any substantive discussion tonight, I would suggest that the commission consider taking that up at the end of the month to make sure that these items get the attention they deserve. With that in mind, we have one item under old business. The item is case 1911, which is an amendment of conditional use permit and site development plan for the property at 5 Brentwood Promenade Court. Is the applicant here? Will you please step forward, sir, and let us know? The commission will recall we took this matter up at the May general meeting, and there were a couple outstanding items in the form of a traffic report. Is that true, sir? Okay. And my understanding is that there were no specific recommendations that needed to be taken into account. Is that correct?
Signs that we fully agreed to add those to our final site plan. They'll be submitted with the building permitting process.
Very good. And for the record, will you please identify yourself, sir?
Yes, my name is Joseph Howley. I'm with Core States Group. I'm here on behalf of Chase Bank.
Okay. And you have or are willing to adopt the two recommendations from CBB, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Are there any other changes to your application from the last May meeting?
No, none.
Ms. Kirkemeyer, staff report?
The only other thing to add was that we wanted to make sure that our fire department was comfortable with the change to the site plan, which the only thing that's changing with the presence of the bank is instead of one row of 90-degree angle, they're going 45-degree angled spaces to accommodate an ATM aisle. But that all came back clear. They applied the fire equipment radiuses onto the site plan, and everything works. So the fire department chief has also signed off on it, if you will. They approved it and they're comfortable with it.
And has the amended application, has that taken into account the two recommendations from CBB?
So we have not asked them to redo the site plan yet. When it would move forward, though, now to the board, assuming it would next Monday night, they will go ahead and just make those alterations to the site plan. And if it does, then that means I can just lift those conditions back out of the ordinance. So that would be the cleaner way to do it.
Questions from commissioners? Any citizen that would like to address the commission on this application? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Bilderback?
I move that we approve or recommend approval of this plan to the Board of Aldermen with the conditions outlined on page 4 of the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bilderback, second by Mr. Favaza. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Sherry Bilderback, Yes. Mark Favaza,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
John Ritter,
Yes.
Lisa Schering,
Yes.
Tom Shipley.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Bilderbeck, and you can get with Ms. Kirkemeyer about the next step. Thank you, sir. Next item under new business is case 1912, application for subdivision review for 2214 Hatton Lane. Is the applicant here? Will you please step forward, sir and ma'am, and introduce yourselves and your application?
It used to be two residential lots. And we are requesting that it be rezoned and re-subdivided back to two original lots as originally zoned. So,
Oh, it used to be subdivided?
yes,
Yes, it was originally subdivided.
yes. And both lots would meet the minimum requirements, the minimum size requirements. So we're simply asking that it be re-subdivided.
Duly noted, and Ms. Kirkemeyer and the commission will recall that our review of this is a ministerial nature. Essentially, if they comply with the city code, then we don't have much else to say about it. Is that correct, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Correct.
And they do comply with the code?
Yes.
Discussion, questions from commissioners? Would any citizen like to address the commission on this application? Yes, Mr. Doyle, please step forward to the microphone and introduce yourself.
I don't really know the details, other than the fact that they want to subdivide. But my feeling is, living in the lot just to the east of the Wilsons, where we have major water issues with the slough that comes down between the homes, that whatever happens, a study of the water flow is done before anything moves forward, because this is going to cause more problems, in my opinion. There are problems with the water slough now that were not addressed when additions were put on homes on the same block. And I think adding more construction would inevitably cause more water problems. Just a thought. Thank you.
I think it's a good thought. I'm not sure it's a thought we can consider at this stage. I would think that would be a thought that should be considered at the building permit stage. Is that correct?
Right. Whenever, if the subdivision was approved and a house plan was submitted, it would have to go through Architectural Review Board. They would look at the general flow of the drainage and how that would be set up, and then a site plan would be submitted actually with the construction plans before a building permit would be issued.
So that thought would be considered, just not at this stage. Anyone else that would like to address the commission? Yes, Tom, please step forward and introduce yourself.
My name's Tom Young. I live at 2210 Park Ridge Avenue. And my concern is similar to Mr. Doyle's, except for the fact that he left out the part that the city built this slough behind the Wilson's home, you know, as a median before it to try to deal with the water issue. But yet with the new survey, that puts it, the lot right in the middle of it. So it's just adding to the you know, having it addressed as far as analyzing the water flow and how it would impact the rest of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, would you like to address this water issue, your neighbors? If you know.
Sure, again, yeah. The area reference is actually not in the lot proper. It's in a common area between that's actually owned by the water company. And it definitely, over the course of, we've been there now 20 years, early in the process, we actually experienced some water problems because our home was the first home that was affected whenever there was a problem in the sewer system primary, which is between, right at the corner of White and Park Ridge. And I'm sure you all, being in the area, have driven by there at times and seen that there's been issues, and that over time, they've tried to address that issue. It's been everything from water pipes breaking down and dissolving, and that sort of thing. But the actual runoff, which goes all the way up to the other end of Haddon, behind our homes, and actually between Mr. Doyle's home and ours, as well as this other gentleman's home and ours, that is actually owned by the water company, and that's where the resolve needs to take place.
Okay. Yeah, I think these are legitimate concerns that are being raised. These people live right behind the house. I'm just not sure it's ripe for consideration of those issues. I think there is going to be an opportunity for consideration of those issues before this house is constructed, correct, Ms. Kirkmeyer?
Well, there are other public meetings, so, but yes, I mean, everyone who got a notice for the subdivision plat, and also they got a notice for a Board of Adjustment meeting that involves this property in a couple of weeks for a variance. So the same group would also get the same notice for an ARB meeting as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone else in the audience that would like to address the commission on this application? Any further comments from commissioners, questions from commissioners?
I had just a question for staff. So just so I'm clear, so this is about the plat line to subdivide it into the two different lots. When they get to the point for the building permit, when we talk about, how high the house is and what the grades are and all that,
So what they'll have to provide is the next step, would be, again, once they would know what type of house they want to place on the lot, the next step then would be for the Architectural Review Board. And what's required in terms of submittal would be, again, the house plan showing the elevations and so forth. And then with that, they would also show which way the drainage would flow. But again, there is no prepared civil drawings, sealed drawings that are required really for at the ARB review stage as well. But then the next step then would be if they would get ARB approval and submit their construction plans, building plans, then a site plan is also submitted with that review. Now that is not, though, that at that point that's an internal review. That's not an external review that involves a public meeting. What has to be shown is, again, not only how the drainage what direction it would go, but also it would have to follow our building codes. And what has to be proven at that step is that with the house that's going to be built, how you're taking the water away from the house. And again, just showing contour lines of what the finished floor elevation of the home would be and the contours for the property. So there you can still pick up which way the drainage is going to go and so forth. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but.
Does it answer your question, Mr. Shipley?
yes.
Any other comments, questions from commissioners? Okay. Chair will entertain, Ms. Bilderbeck.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to the Board of Aldermen approval of both the preliminary and final plat for the subdivision.
Second,
Motion by Ms. Bilderbeck, second by Mr. Shipley. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Sherry Bilderback, yes. Rebecca Jacobs?
Yes.
John Ritter?
Yes.
Lisa Schuring?
Yes.
Tom Shipley?
yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I vote yes.
Oh, Mark, sorry. Mark Bavaza?
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms.
I
Bilderbeck.
knew I missed one.
And Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Ms. Kirkemeyer will walk you through the next step. Thank you.
Who was the
Okay.
second?
Mr. Shipley.
Thank you.
We have two related items for our next two items that we can take together unless there's any objection. We'll require two different votes, both having to do with 3000 South Brentwood Boulevard, an application for subdivision review, similar to the last application, as well as an application for site plan review for Ameren Electric. Is the applicant here? Will you please step forward, sir, and introduce yourself and your applications?
My name is Spence Kelly. I'm with Jacobs Engineering, and we're contracted with Ameren, Missouri, to do a lot of the site development work as well as the permitting associated with the project. The entire, half-acre piece of the development is a 0.69 acre breakout. Half acre of it will be raised, will be a retaining wall and a substation, electrical substation will be placed on it. From the permitting aspect, it's located in the wetlands of Deer Creek, as well as the floodplain. And we're applying for MSD permits, U.S. Army Corps permits, and no-rise application for impacts to the floodway through the city as well.
Ms. Kirkemeyer, staff report.
So the project actually involves two applications before the P&Z. One is just the subdivision plat, again, creating a two-lot split, two-lot subdivision for the purpose of still the bi-state property and the garage, and then the second parcel being the parcel then that the substation would be built. The second application that this involves, though, is still site plan review for the actual substation. So if we're kind of taking those two together, my first comment on the subdivision, I think Spence probably covered everything since it is, though, in the floodplain. We are going to have everything documented for no rise certificate. And I think we even already received that, correct? Yeah. So I haven't looked at it, but we have received it. The only thing to note here is that the property is zoned light industrial. And typically, there is a minimum lot size requirement of an acre in the light industrial district. But in this case, substations are the exception. So that is why this can go ahead and move forward with just a smaller lot of, forget what the total size is here, but it is permissible to go ahead and subdivide it in this way. And then the site plan, we can get into that at a later time if you'd like, but the site plan's been submitted as well. And everything is shown on there in terms of having the equipment enclosure, a little bit of the fence material that would be around the facility and so forth. There is a 20-foot wide access strip that would be provided for them to be able to maintain the substation. And if there's any other questions, I can answer them. So.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkemeyer. Any questions?
I have one.
Yep, Mr. Shipley?
And I don't know if this is in our purview or not. There's a substation in the 2600 block of Hanley Road, which is actually technically in Maplewood, but if you're in Brentwood, it's right there. It's right at the street, it's right at the curb, and there's a chain link fence, and it's not nearly as attractive as this new one. Is this going to replace that one, and that goes away?
They're two separate substations from my understanding, but Liz Seeley is also here from Ameren if I don't think that's the case, but that's not your understanding, is it? I think they're both going to remain, as far as I know.
Well, I'll just put this out there on just guessing our colleagues over in Maplewood, if it's possible to put something like this around that one, that might make that one look better.
I can certainly pass that along to somebody.
It's not in our jurisdiction, but our citizens can see it.
That's a good point. Any further questions from commissioners? Would any citizen like to address the commission on either of these two applications from Ameren? Any further discussion from the commissioners? First, with regard to the subdivision review, Ms. Kirkemeyer, in coordination with the zoning attorney for the city, you've confirmed that the proposed subdivision complies with all code
I
requirements?
have, because these don't come along every day, but yes, I did.
Same ministerial standard here. Taking that into account, are there any other questions, or is there a motion? Ms. Bilderback?
First, I have a question. Can we put both in the same motion?
I don't think we should.
No, yes,
Yep,
no?
no.
Okay, so I make a motion that we recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen of case number 19-13 Deer Creek subdivision as a preliminary and final plat.
Second?
Motion by Ms. Bilderback, second by Mr. Shipley to approve and recommend approval of the preliminary and final subdivision plat. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Sherry Bilderback, yes. Mark Pavaza,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs.
Yes.
John Ritter,
Yes.
Lisa Schuring,
Yes.
Tom Shipley.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great, thank you. Now moving forward to the site plan review. Ms. Kirkemeyer, you addressed this briefly. Anything else to add on this site plan?
I don't believe so. I think I thought the application was very complete in terms of the ornamental fencing that they're proposing and so forth, so unless you have questions.
Yeah, no, I concur with Mr. Shipley. Very pleased to see this type of fencing as compared with the other site in town. I'm sure our colleagues in the city of Maplewood would feel the same way, so I have no issues with this site plan. Any questions from commissioners? Yeah,
I
Mr.
guess
Favazza?
one for Lisa. Is this plot of land going to be affected at all by all the flood mitigation we're doing down on Lower Manchester?
No, I mean, at some point, and there's been enough in public meetings, I guess, to make this statement, but the city has been working also with Bi-State to acquire the additional land around this to hopefully plan for a future phase of the Greenway and so forth. But at this point in time, it should not alter anything that's going on, and certainly with the flood mitigation, which is our primary goal right now, so.
So it's within all the our stuff we just approved with the Brentwood bound and everything. It's
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
It's not going to affect any of that. Okay.
No complication, no inconsistency?
No, because actually this is even outside of the 353 redevelopment area. It's certainly in the same part of the community, but it really isn't part of the 353 redevelopment area and the parcels we've been acquiring for flood mitigation purposes.
Any further discussion on the site plan? Chair will entertain a motion. Ms. Bilderbeck?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen of case number 19-14, site plan review of Lot 1 of Deer Creek subdivision.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Bilderbeck, second by Mr. Favazza. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Sherry Bilderbeck, yes. Mark Favazza?
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs?
Yes.
John Ritter?
Yes.
Lisa Schuring?
Yes.
Tom Shipley?
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bilderbeck, and you can work with Ms. Kirkemeyer, sir. Thank you for your applications. Thank you, ma'am. All right, last item is a comprehensive sign plan and architectural review for the property at 1819 South Hanley Road, Aspen Dental. Is the applicant here? Will you please step forward, ma'am, and introduce yourself and your application?
Sue Demond with Demond Sign Company. We're the installer for this customer.
Anything further?
Well, you already have the plans in front of you, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if I could just answer any questions you have?
Okay. Well, first question is that this application doesn't seem to comply with our city code. Is that true, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Correct.
Okay,
which
and
is
have
why
you
it's-
had an opportunity to look at the staff report?
I have not seen the staff report.
Okay, Ms. Kirkemeyer, staff report?
Okay. Yes, it was sent, forwarded to Michael Cohen with Anchor Sign, who name was on the petition. I spoke to him about it. So anyway, but yes, because it doesn't meet our general signage requirements, there's either two approaches to take. Either you can go forward with some variances, sign variances, actually go to the Board of Adjustment, or the second thing would be to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for using that comprehensive sign plan provision. So because there's actually two things here before you, the comprehensive sign plan, but then also, if you remember when the building elevations went through approval as part of the amendment to the CUP, it had pictured blue awnings on the elevations, but it noted also on there that the type of materials would be brought back by the tenants of the building. So that's why we really suggested just to come through and, do it as a sign plan provision and amendment of the site plan. So really, there's two things. It's looking for the extra signage, and then also the approval of the blue awnings, which now they said the material they would like to have would be metal standing seam material. So, and then in terms of the sign, there would only be one, if you went with the general signage regulations, you would only have one wall sign for this project, for this building, and then also one ground-mounted sign. Their proposal is for 3 wall signs, and they are still desiring to put the wall signs, which are sign A, sign B, and sign D, on the northeast and west sides of the building. So, and then all 3 wall signs would be greater in size area than what would be allowed. And how it's determined how much sign area you are allowed is based on the amount of linear commercial street frontage that they have, and their only street frontage is along Hanley.
Yeah, this struck me as an oversigned application. Does Buffalo Wild Wings have their name on 3 elevations?
Good question.
They
I
may.
don't know.
Yeah, otherwise, I can't think of another business that had these big wall signs on 3 of the elevations. But open it up to the commissioners, Ms. Bilderback.
I share the same concerns about the application, Mr. Chairman, and also I would note that I'm uncertain about how I feel about the blue metal. We had an ordinance, it's not related to awnings because it didn't come up, but it applied to roof and how we don't allow the metal roofing, and this is the same material as the metal roofing that we didn't allow on certain frontages in the city. So I would have some concern about that as well. Thank you,
You
Mr.
want
Chairman.
cloth awnings? Is that,
Huh?
you want the cloth type awnings or no awnings?
I would feel better maybe about cloth or, having some further discussion about it, but the metal, I think, is inconsistent with the spirit of the code that we've gone to, even though it's not the
Okay.
letter of the code. Yeah.
Is this a variance meeting?
No.
Why are we here? It's kind of confusing because I'm working
Sure.
for Anchor Sign and you're
So,
talking
I'm
Anchor Sign.
Yeah, so I didn't know, because I actually think you almost represent a different company, do you not? Demond Signs?
We're the
Or-
installer, we're locals,
Okay,
so that's why
so
they sent me.
This kind of goes back to Michael Cohen, who is the actual petitioner here, and he's with Anchor Sign. And so he had said that he was not going to be able to attend the meeting himself, but that he was going to have the local representative come. So all this has been communicated now through Mike up to this point, so I can see why she's,
Right.
she's been left out of the loop
Yeah,
apparently.
understood.
Yeah, sorry.
No, mate.
I thought we were just here to basically discuss materials and that sort of thing, not a variance. I thought they had already gotten
we're here
that part
to-
out of the way, so.
We need to discuss compliance with the code. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that tonight. We need, it strikes me as something that needs to be tabled to subcommittee unless there's any further discussions with the commission. Chair will entertain a motion to table this. I'm sorry, is there any, Ms. Smith, would you like to address the commission on this? Okay, Ms. Bilderback?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to table this application and send it to site plan.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bilderback, second by Mr. Shipley. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, stand tabled. And with regard to that, the next consideration, we have a subcommittee meeting currently set for June the 26th, which seems to work better with the commission. I am unable to make that. Ms. Kirkmeyer, are you still able to make the 26th?
Yeah.
Okay, and Mr. Shipley is agreeable to chairing that meeting, so if it's okay with the commission, we can keep that at June the 26th at, what time would you like it, Mr. Shipley?
6 is fine.
Okay, 6 o'clock, okay with you, Ms. Demond?
That's
I do have,
fine. May I speak to you tomorrow in regard to some of this so I can
Sure.
get
Yes.
on board?
Yep,
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get a copy of that staff report, okay?
thank
could,
you.
could we get, so this came before us before, this Aspen Dental, about a year ago. Could we get a copy of that for the
Of
subcommittee of the
report,
previous?
Or of the whole package, you mean,
The-
more or less, the report?
The
and
package that we looked at and approved
Okay,
before and
sure.
look at it
Yeah,
side
we'll
by
have some
side.
copies.
Okay,
Or
great.
we can email that out.
Great.
Okay, we also have election of officers, so my understanding is we need to open this back up to nominations, is that correct, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Yes.
Okay,
Last time.
well, my understanding is that I was nominated for chairperson. So why don't we just open up the nomination, are there any other nominations for chairperson? Okay, seeing none, I'm happy to serve, so thank you for your confidence. There was one nomination for vice chair, it was Mr. Shipley. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Shipley. And, let's see, Mr. Nuremberger was the sole nominee for secretary. Are there any other nominations for secretary? Okay, seeing none, Notwithstanding his in attendance tonight and acknowledged reason for not being here, I suppose Mr. Nurnberger's been elected to another term. I see no alderman. Ms. Kirkemeyer, city planners report?
The only thing I'll mention is that we have a draft of a medical marijuana ordinance for you to start looking at. So I don't know, we can either start the discussion in site plan, or should we just put it on the July regular meeting? Because we will have to have a regular meeting for sure in July to address these items for tonight, so.
I think July would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ms. Kirkemeyer.
We'll get that out though in advance to you, so you have a chance to read through it before we meet.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Kirkemeyer, you can handle rationale. Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Ms. Bilderbach, second by Mr. Shipley. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, stand adjourned. All right, any goals yet?
That one.